Pinkertons Ghosts is a horror anthology podcast by Superversive Radio, with no affiliation with any detective agency, person, real or imagined, or the dark forces of Outre Terre. It is not intended for children.
Morrow reporting in. Control, you asked me about my journey from the Pacific Northwest to the Ozarks. I am unwilling to tell you everything. If you live to see me die, you might be lucky enough to convince Jack to let you read my diaries. Here is an excerpt with context. After I escaped the compounds and my pike, I found myself in Lower Idaho without a prayer. It was the end of September, and I did not want to be stuck in the mountains without reasonable shelter. Jack wouldn't survive the cold, and neither would I dressed in the ritual garments. They were like a toga, but not. I had been given thin sandals, various brooches and seals of occult meaning I discarded the second I stopped to rest, and a snood. This was thick, and made a great help in keeping Jack warm. Jack is a lean teenager, and he was an even thinner baby. I worried about his nutrition every minute I wasn't eating something. A blessing from my mother, at least. I knew how to forage for food. Pine seeds, herbs, and even the occasional fish I was quick enough to catch with my sharpened stick. It wasn't good for the long term, you understand. I did not get enough fat, and I was aware I was having trouble producing milk. I considered scourging through the towns I'd passed on the way, to who knows where, for food and maybe a steam tunnel to keep warm in. Every time I came near, there were these cars that just sat there. 2 to 3 men. A Masonic symbol on their rear view bumpers, or other things. Just hand gestures made to a friend. They were looking for me. They knew what troubles I'd face. They knew I was smart enough to know what I'd need to survive. My mother wasn't just some hippie who thought she could live in a van and be okay and one with nature and other tripe. No. She had us farm and forage, and know what animals to watch out for, how to read the weather, and when to take shelter. The problem was that I was alone, with the clothes on my back, a baby in my arms, and desperation. Unending desperation. I was never going to surrender him, no matter the cost. It didn't make me a good human. The cruelty of what I would have done to Jack was multifold, like an infinite origami crane. I was taught how to care for him and what to do to keep his development on track. It didn't matter that I was going to lay him on an altar as soon as I could stand. I had to care for the child. Enough to love him, or it wouldn't work. I got lucky dumpster diving a few times. Some party threw out a ton of mayo-stuffed chicken sandwiches. Another time I'd met an old woman who gave me a sub sandwich. Then, a pair of men drove down the street in a black car. They chased me into the woods, but I lost them. I don't know how, but I did. It drove me deeper in, and further up. I was panicked. Or maybe the emotions just broke through and I had to face them. I don't know. I'll take a bullet before a therapist. The facts of the matter are the facts. I could be the scared little girl running through the forest, or I can be the woman trying to raise a son. It was in this state that the first snows fell. It had been a dry winter so far, but when it snowed, it didn't stop. I lost my sandals sometime in the run. I had found a discarded piece of clothing here and there, but it wasn't near enough. Not one bit. So, I kept walking, my skin burning in the snow. I had no way to shelter. I couldn't find a cave, and I didn't have the means to start a fire. As pathetic as it is, I never mastered the rotating stick trick. Jack wasn't reacting to the cold well, even as I tried to keep him out of the winds. He still needed to feed, and I was always scared of smothering him. I spoke to him throughout the journey, but now I was babbling, half shouting. It kept me and him awake. He looked up at me with those dark eyes, and I could take another step. We were halfway up a mountain, following a hunting trail through the trees. The snow had been melting before, but the cold was growing, and the snow stuck. I was on a timer before my feet became irreparably damaged by frostbite. It would be the end, but slow. My only hope would be to walk into a police station and ask, pretty please, if they knew my grandfather, Tom Morrow. He lives in the Ozarks. No, I don't know his number. No, I don't know where exactly. Look, my mother runs this crazy compound allied in the Masons that... No, I'm not on drugs. Please don't take Jack from me. But I was close to that future. So very close. I could see twinkling lights of a small town. Maybe 1,000 people hunkering down for a snowstorm. Warm and fed. Not worrying about whether their baby will freeze to death before or after you will. I saw something come between me and the town. It flew without sound. It was hungry. Blood red eyes pierced me. It wanted my meat. I found energy to run. The immense bird flapped beside the mountain, looking for an angle on me. I wouldn't see it coming. The speed of predatory birds is unrivaled. I ran as fast as I could. I kept cover. Only the size of the bird saved me. If it was even the size of an ostrich rather than the size of... I couldn't comprehend it. It was big. It flew up above the mountain, and I could still see its detail in the moonlight. It opened its beak and heard a low cry. It was like an owl's hoot, but it reverberated through the sky. It was like a hand pushing it down on me. An animal. Who would mourn me and Jack if I had died? I made a mistake, and the beast dived. It threw aside clouds in its wrath. I ran for it, but the thing came on, silently, swiftly. I leaped off the side of the mountain and fell with my back to the ground, protecting Jack with my body. If I died, perhaps the same God that sent me the love I needed to spare him would also send a she-wolf to nurse him and save him from the bird. I was a silly girl. The precipice was barely a few yards tall, and it was covered in fluffy snow. The bird crashed behind me in a thunderclap. Snow flew up, and even rocks fell around me like hailstones. I got up and started running. I wouldn't stop until I felt the beak around my neck. The monstrous predator reared up and gave chase. Its claws leapt the precipice and nimbly dodged through the wide-spaced trees. The savage beak snapped near my head. I could smell gore and worse on its breath. I leapt across a small creek. The bird slipped on the sheet of ice. It was then I saw my salvation. A cabin, not 50 feet from me. I made the mad dash. The great bird could not right itself in time. The cabin was locked, but I unburied the doormat and found the key. I thanked God Almighty that the lock wasn't iced, that the key turned, and I was through. I slammed the door behind me and locked it. The bird slammed into the door. It was too big to get through, but it tried. I screamed as it hooted its strangely gravitic call. I felt rooted to the spot. The cabin withstood the enraged beak and wings of the massive creature. It gave up, but in one of the windows, I saw it land on a log some 100 feet away. It was strange. If it was stock still, you could not see it. But wherever I was, I could always feel its gaze. My first consideration was heat. I lit the Franklin stove. I had been running through the snow for who knows how long now. The reheating process my body went through was one of the worst experiences of my life. Yes, control. Even to my adulthood. Fire mixed with nerve tingles as warmth and blood coursed through my extremities again. Jack cried during the entire process. Maybe as a reaction to my own groaning. Maybe for his own discomfort. By the grace of God, neither of us experienced more than a few blisters. But I was lame in the feet for weeks. My second consideration was food. And again, God provided. The cabin had a whole wall dedicated to foodstuffs. In a moment, I was devouring some smoked fish. I nearly vomited, but I kept it down. I reminded myself of my need for discipline. I considered, deeply, the dangers of refeeding syndrome. I wasn't going to escape a monster, but died because I couldn't control my appetites. I took care of Jack and considered what resources I had to hand. I had enough food for several months, but only by the way of fats and protein. I could live on it, but I'd have to scavenge for vitamin C. I'd have to forage pine needles, any remaining fruit frozen on the vine, and things like wild garlic. I could have blessed my mother. Could have. Didn't. There were clothes, mostly men's outerwear, but some women's garments, and even some cloth that would do Jack good. A rifle hung above the stove, and I did find ammunition for it. That, and the hunting knives, gave me a good kit if I should be attacked again. A hand-cracked radio and some other electronics sat on a shelf. Last of note, there were some books. A well-worn Tarzan, several books on hunting and local wildlife, and a Bible, New King James Version, Schofield with references. For the first few days, I did nothing. I laid Jack against my chest and slept on the floor. I was insensate for days. I would wake up, keep the fire going, eat something, take care of Jack, sleep. My body had held up, but I paid the price then. Something had died within me during the first few months of the journey. The fear, the stress. My body ate itself without my knowing. All the rest of the world couldn't repair that. Not that I understood then. I was a girl recovering in a cabin. I read the books, familiarized myself with the area around the cabin whenever I deemed it safe to do so, and listened to the radio. The bird terrorized the two of us for the entire time I stayed there. It stalked me through the windows. First was one blood-red eye watching from the glass. Then, it was some tail feathers in front of the door. Sometimes it sat on the chimney. It went out and hunted for its food. Once a deer's carcass slammed against a window, cracking it. The blood got in. It dragged it out to its roosting log and ate the thing piece by piece. It stared me down any time I looked up from repairing the window. Its red eyes were deep wells of malice and hatred. I knew it hated me, a daughter of Eve, for the sake of hating me. The same love that made me snatch Jack from the altar was the mirror of this undying hatred. The black center pulsed and rotated, as if it saw me dying on the ground. Guts pulled out, and the blood iris, I couldn't bear it. Then it would fly away for some time. Sometimes a day, sometimes 15 minutes. It would return, and the only warning of my silent harasser would be a shining red eye at a window that had been empty only seconds ago. I hated it. Once I was no longer a continuous fight or flight, I sat down to consider my circumstances. While I could hold out in this cabin until summer, I had no desire to meet the cabin's owner. Something about this place told me that he was likely a Mason, or a cop, or just someone who wouldn't let me go after feasting on his smoked fish and baked beans. So, I had to leave just before the roads became drivable. The real obstacle was the bird of prey. I had to kill it. The rifle above the mantel was a .22. I could fire it, and knew how to handle one. My father had taught me a little before he left. Would it kill the bird? Would it even pierce its flesh? Its skull? I didn't know the terms then, but it was a creature of the outre terre. It was not natural to our world as we know it. Something, somehow, somewhere, it had broken through into this hemisphere. Whether it was a prank or a joke, who knew? Maybe it was some pet let out in the winter. Maybe it was just some horrible bird that wanted to kill. It's hard to understand hate before you really feel it. This thing hated. It would never leave me to live my life. I would have to kill it. Myself. The gun gave me a fighting chance. I trained and exercised. Whether or not I killed the bird, I'd have to leave soon anyway. I didn't know how I could get past Denver, Mason Central, but I'd cross that bridge later. I didn't know how I'd get past the deserts between here and Missouri, and not to mention the endless cornfields of Kansas. In Missouri, that's a dangerous place. The people are violent and territorial. It was no place a young woman like me went. I'd cross those bridges later. For now, the bird. I hardened my heart. I scouted the area during the bird's hunts. The snow was so deep, I could move entirely under the surface. Certain hollows and breaks in the tree line would allow me to strike and not be immediately eaten. Several trees had tall drifts of snow. Perfect spots to ambush a gigantic bird. Hatred or no, I would kill it. Hatred was easy. Revenge is hard. Jack was growing fast. He's active. He wasn't crawling yet, but he was a squirming, cooing, hungry baby boy. I was a bit lost on the timeline for development. I couldn't tell if he was supposed to crawl yet or not. Was he 4 months old? 5? I'm going to have to choose a time in late summer and tell him that. It'll serve as well as anything else. The fat little thing was only going to get heavier. Don't laugh, Control, but a 20-pound baby is a heavy burden when you're barely 100 pounds. I practiced with my gun. Loading, unloading, dry firing. I was scared to fire within the cabin. The red eye watched me. The eye of the bird of prey was not just a pair of circles surrounded by some white ball flesh. The red was variated. Have you seen those tie-dye shirts where one pours paint into water and then use a toothpick to mix the colors? The red motion within the immense ball was exquisite. I had sisters in the commune who could lay out a rainbow and could pacify Noah himself. But this, Dracula would call it garish. The red dripped and flowed over itself like a vortex. The black of the pupil wasn't black so much as the deepest possible red. Infrared. All fire. It was red on the edge of a black hole made from dead stars. Dead star. He was giving me dreams. Nightmares of a dead star that floated near the cursed Algol. It had lost its physical existence during the war in heaven. Whatever place it had in heaven, its corpse floated lifeless in the galaxy. It was flesh and blood. It hated. That hate was a miasma, a fog, that it poured into the cabin. I was shocked at times that me and Jack woke up each morning. It certainly drove me to read the Bible. I found a very nice verse, the exact thing to give me courage. Judges 5:26. She stretched her hand to the tent peg, her right hand to the workman's hammer. She pounded Sarissa. She pierced his head. She split and struck through his temple. From one point of view, a bullet is just a miniature steak propelled by an explosion. The killing of Sierra was a righteous act, surely. This was just an animal. The thing returned, stared at me as I played with Jack and spoke with him. It returned to its log roost. It slept. It was time to act. I crept out into the day. The snow was above the cabin door. I baffled it with cloth so it made no sound. I swam through the snow. I had covered myself in blankets and coats. I had spared the coat in my size, but I'm afraid the master of the cabin would have to bring a new wardrobe. The cold burned, but I was not going to let physical pain get in my way. I had marked the path and the trees during the brief times of low snowdrifts. I found the right tree. I wedged myself inside it. I found the surface of the drift. I poked out enough of a hole to see through. The beast still slept. Inch by inch, I pulled my gun from my shoulder and aimed it through the hole. Now, I waited. No animal should control the destiny of a daughter of Eve. Its wings protected its eyes, covering them like a shield. I could see the cruel beak, I could see the blood dripping from its sharp tip. There was a smell of blood and rot that could not be masked by the snow. Whether it came from the immense bird or a corpse left out to rot in the snow, I didn't know. I bore it. I had never seen this thing have a nest or a mate. Nothing watched over it but the foul stars that sired it. I waited. It did not snow during my watch. I saw it breathe, steam rising into the air like glitter. It rustled, the wings dislodging some snow that fell on it from a branch. I knew where its eye was, but I didn't know if I could pierce those feathers with my bullet. My nerves shook me, but I waited for that moment. I wanted, craved its death. Did it know? Could it sense it? Was it that I was alone that brought it to me? With a part of my heart that demanded I do everything in my power to protect Jack? Against Pike. Against the dark gods I would have given him to. Against everyone. The moment began. It heaved. The wings expanded and flapped once. It looked at me. I fired. I hit it. The eye shattered like a glass window. It bled and steamed. The thing screeched. It lost that gravity that had put fear into me. Instead, it was in pain. The eye was blinded. It froze. I fired again, hoping to destroy brain matter. I never saw an exit wound. It reeled, falling onto its back. It flapped and twitched, one leg kicking. Its death throes threw up snow in massive wingfuls. It was like watching a blizzard localized in the body of a dying monster. Its white feathers blended into the snow. The feet were buried. The head was out of sight. But I could see the movements under the snow. The wings were the last to go. When it stopped moving, I couldn't see it anymore. Not the body, not the blood. Nothing. Nothing but snow. Nothing had been there. Nothing would be there. I returned to the cabin. Jack was waiting for me. This time, the warmth didn't hurt so much. The winter passed. By the end of the season, I had gathered together a traveling kit. I had normal clothes, a jacket with a hood. I hid my face with a scarf. I had found a saw that could cut metal and shorten the rifle barrel so I could hide it on me. That, and the knives, and food, and canteens. And Jack over all in a papoose. I must have made a strange sight. A girl wandering the forest, looking for all the world like some survivor of the apocalypse. I was going to make it, no matter what. That's all for now, Control. Morrow out.
Pinkertons Ghosts is a podcast distributed by Superversive Radio, licensed under an attribution non-commercial, share-alike international license. This episode was written by Ben Wheeler and performed by Celina Saucedo. Ben Wheeler edits, directs, produces, and herds cats. Kid Dickerson performs our audio editing. Visit us on Facebook, read articles on superversivesf.com, or listen to us on unauthorized Acast, iTunes, or Spotify. Contact us through Twitter at Pinkertons Ghost, email us at pinkertonsghosts@gmail.com, or send us noble messenger possums with messages strapped to their backs. Don't worry, they know how to find us. Thank you for listening, and good luck.